And what if I told you that your favorite rock stars aren't just talented musicians, but actually high-functioning nightmares who treat their employees like disposable battery? You think having a bad boss is a desk job at the paper company where somebody steals your stapler? Not quite. You have no idea what a bad day at the office looks like until you're fishing a handbag out of a literal inferno. These legends had millions of dollars, sold out stadiums, and egos so massive they required their own zip codes and specialized plumbing. Here's how the icons of the stage turned their personal assistants into overqualified, traumatized babysitters. And then you have Madonna. Madonna has a very specific problem. She cannot stand change. And most people, they go on tour, they stay in hotels, but Madonna did not want a hotel room. She wanted her actual house. And so her assistants had to coordinate shipping her furniture, her rugs, her chairs, personal items to every single city on the world tour. Now, of course, there's a bit of an issue with the logistics of that. You're not just packing a suitcase. You're moving an entire mansion's worth of decor every 3 days. We're not talking just furniture. She also demanded 20 international phone lines be installed backstage at every venue. And this is the early 90s, folks. You can't just flip a switch. You have to have technicians crawling through the rafters because the material girl needs to call Tokyo from a dressing room in Des Moines. But it gets weirder. She also demanded that her dressing rooms be deep cleaned and fitted with brand new toilets that she bought herself. She didn't want to use a toilet that a commoner or a roadie might have looked at. And speaking of looking, she had a strict rule. No direct eye contact. If you were a lowly staff member and you accidentally glanced at her while she was walking to the stage, that's it. You were out. You had to treat her like a solar eclipse. If you look directly at the sun, you go blind. And if you look at Madonna, well, then you lose your health insurance. Now, if you think Madonna is a lot, then let's look no further than Mariah Carey. And Mariah's demands are so over the top, they almost feel like a prank, but they're not. Mariah reportedly has an assistant whose entire job, literally the only reason they exist on the payroll, is to catch her chewing gum. And so, when Mariah is done with a piece of gum, she does not look for a trash can. She just expects a hand to appear so she could drop the gray glob into it. And that's not even the most specific part. Her coffee, it must be stirred counterclockwise. Only counterclockwise. If you stir that cream in a clockwise motion, you basically ruin her entire day and possibly the vocal tracks for the entire next album. And then there's the zoo. At certain appearances, Mariah has requested 20 white kittens and 100 white doves. Now think about the poor assistant who has to source 20 matching kittens on short notice in a city like Cleveland. Then you have to make sure they're white. If one of those kittens has a gray spot, the Ms. Carey vibe is ruined. And that's another thing. You have to call her Ms. Carey at all times, even when you're standing there with your palm open, waiting for her to spit out a piece of Hubba Bubba. And then we have Jack White. You'd think a guy who plays kind of raw, stripped-down blues rock would be low maintenance, but Jack White has a legally binding guacamole contract. No joke. His tour rider includes a specific recipe for homemade guacamole that must be followed to the letter. So the avocados have to be a specific variety. Texture has to be chunky, not smooth. And here's the kicker. The pits must remain in the bowl. If the assistant forgets the pits, then the theory has it that the guacamole might turn brown. And if it browns, well, then the show's basically over. There's also a no bananas rule written in all caps. This was a little more understandable. The entire tour must be a banana-free zone because of a staph allergy. So if someone absent-mindedly walks in with a Chiquita banana, it's a breach of contract. Imagine being an assistant with a college degree, standing in the kitchen 4 o'clock p.m., sweating over the ripeness of a Hass avocado because the dude in a bowling shirt won't play Seven Nation Army until that dip is perfect. So now Katy Perry has a rider that is 45 pages long. For context, that's longer than some mortgage agreements. And the things in this rider are so specific they'll make your head spin. One of the main jobs for her assistant is ensuring that no car she travels in has black seats. And so if the car service sends a Cadillac with a black leather interior, the assistant has to scramble like really quick. The seats must be cream or white. Why? Who knows? Maybe black leather's too edgy for a pop star who wears cupcakes on her chest. She also requires rose-scented candles to be lit and burning in every room before she even enters. If she walks into a room and it doesn't smell like a botanical garden, somebody is gonna get friggin' hammered. And the funniest part is that she told a reporter she was not a diva. She said, don't you want some sliced turkey and some baby wipes? Well, maybe, but that doesn't require a 45-page legal document to ensure your car seats aren't the wrong color of beige. And that brings us to Lady Gaga. This one's kind of actually sad. During the Monster Ball tour, Gaga's assistant, Jennifer O'Neill, was required to share a bed with Lady Gaga every single night. Gaga apparently refused to sleep alone, so she turned her employee into a human security blanket. And so, Jennifer had to be there 24/7. If Gaga woke up in the middle of the night and wanted to watch a different movie, Jennifer had to get up and switch the DVD. She had to manage 20 bags of luggage, handle all the calls, and administer Gaga's medication in the morning. Gaga later said in a deposition that it wasn't a 9-to-5 job, and that she needed her assistant to be available whenever she felt like it. But here's the thing about that. Jennifer O'Neill didn't find the human teddy bear gig very charming. She sued for $393,000 in unpaid overtime. Settlement terms were undisclosed, but she also landed a $1 million book deal. That is a very expensive way to avoid sleeping alone. And then there's Beyonce. Beyonce's demands are stuff of legend. During the Miss Carter Show tour, her rider allegedly required alkaline water that was chilled to exactly 21 degrees. Not 20, not 22, 21 degrees. And she wouldn't just drink it out of a glass. She required $900 custom-made titanium straws, because apparently plastic or paper just didn't deliver the hydration the way a metal pipe does. Paper straws, I'm sorry, but have any of you in the comments section ever had a shake with a paper straw? It's a horrible experience. If you have, let me know down there. She also demanded that the walls of her dressing room be painted plain off-white and that every crew member wear 100% pure cotton clothing. So if you're lighting tech and you show up in a polyester blend, you're now a walking health hazard to the queen. She also requires red toilet paper. Not white, not quilted northern, but red. It's like she wanted that bathroom scene experience to look like a scene from the Kubrick movie or something. And when your toilet paper costs more than most people's groceries, you've officially exited the atmosphere of reality. And then we get into the truly dark stuff with Marilyn Manson. And Manson's former assistants have described a workplace that sounds more like a dungeon than a rock tour. One assistant, Ashley Walters, claimed that she was treated like property and even ordered to transport all sorts of narcotics across international borders. So she wasn't really a scheduler, she was a mule, according to the job description. Another assistant, Dan Cleary, said Manson once sucker punched him in the head during a concert in South Korea. The publicist's excuse? They happened on stage at a rock concert, as if the presence of a guitar suddenly makes getting whacked in the head a professional perk. Manson, of course, lived in a house where the windows were all blacked out. He was never awake during the day. His assistants had to live in this perpetual midnight, catering to a guy who essentially turned his home into a giant sensory deprivation tank. It wasn't just a job, it was one whacked-out adventure. Now, Joan Jett is a rock icon, but according to one of her former assistants, she is also the world champion of the silent treatment. This assistant filed a lawsuit claiming that Joan Jett refused to make eye contact or speak directly to any of her staff. And so, if Joan wanted a glass of water, she wouldn't ask the assistant standing right next to her. She would whisper to a bandmate, and then that bandmate would tell the assistant. Makes for a pretty awkward situation. And the lawsuit, like almost every other one on the list, was about unpaid overtime. Because if you're going to treat somebody like they're invisible, you should probably at least make sure their paycheck is visible. So let's talk about Sharon and Ozzy. The thing about the Osbornes is that they were basically the royal family of the heavy metal dysfunction. Back in the day, Sharon had this personal assistant. One night, their house catches on fire. Now, a normal person sees a fire and they think, well, I should get my family and the employees out of the building. But not Sharon. And so as the flames are licking the walls, Sharon looks at her assistant and she tells him to go back inside. She doesn't want him to save her pet or a family heirloom. Nope, she wants her artwork. And so this guy, who is literally just trying to collect a paycheck, runs into a burning building to save a painting. Makes it out alive, but he's covered in soot, coughing, and understandably he's a bit on the ticked off side. And that's when the punchline hits. Sharon and Ozzy are standing there and they're cracking up. They think the sight of this terrified, smoke-covered man is the funniest thing they've ever seen. And when the assistant doesn't start giggling along with them while his lungs are full of ash, Sharon then fires him. She actually fired him for having no sense of humor. Meanwhile, Ozzy had his own situation going on with his longtime assistant, Big Dave. Big Dave's job wasn't just getting coffee. He had to manage Ozzy's entire medicinal intake, act as a human shield, basically be a licensed nurse. Ozzy actually required a professional ear, nose, and throat doctor to be on call at every single venue. Imagine being a specialist who went to medical school for 8 years just to stand backstage in case a guy who bit the head off a bat gets a tickle in his throat. It's a 24-hour babysitting gig where the baby weighs 180 pounds and might wander off into traffic at any second. But here's the thing. Sometimes the crazy requests actually make sense. And that leads us to Van Halen and the brown M&Ms. I told this story in great detail on one of my Van Halen videos. But their contract said they needed a bowl of M&Ms backstage with all the brown ones removed, among like a whole litany of other things. Of course, for years, people were like, what the hell are they doing? What kind of ego is that? I mean, if they only knew what was going to come with Mariah Carey and Katy Perry and everybody else. But David Lee Roth would walk into a dressing room, see a single brown M&M and lose his mind, scream at the promoter. And it wasn't because, he hated brown M&Ms. He was doing it because the Van Halen stage show was massive, had tons of lighting and heavy equipment that could literally take people out if the floor wasn't reinforced. So the brown M&M clause was kind of a canary in a coal mine. If the promoter did not read the contract closely enough to take out the candy, it meant they probably didn't read the safety aspects for the stage rigging either. One time they found a brown M&M, did a safety check, discovered that the floor couldn't handle the weight. Stage sank through and caused $80,000 in damage. And so that quote-unquote diva request was actually a pretty brilliant engineering check. It's the one time on this list where the assistant's weird task actually saved lives instead of just saving a painting from a fire. Like, subscribe. Thank you.